let's get the day started. Today's topic, we're going to talk about the art of forgiveness. Maybe not the art of it, but just talking about forgiveness, because I have experienced a lot in the past this past year about forgiveness, and I've been on both sides of the spectrum. So one side, I really wanted to be forgiven. And then on another side, in a different relationship, I had to learn how to forgive. And these were both very near and dear, relationships to me. And so they affected me very strongly. And they taught me the most important lessons, which honestly, the most valued relationships we have in our lives are the ones that are going to teach us the most important lessons, whether they hurt us or not, right? And it's unfortunate that most of the time it's when they hurt us is when we learn some other lessons, right? Or when we feel hurt, because there's the difference between them hurting us or when we feel hurt, which is that whole idea of being triggered, right? So let's get into forgiveness, guys. So first of all, what is the definition of forgiveness? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. In general, it involves an internal decision to let go of any resentment or anger within the relationship. It sounds easy, right? It sounds like we should just know what we're supposed to do when we forgive people. Time will pass and eventually we'll forgive. But the process of forgiving is not, yes, it can happen just over time if you let that feeling or resentment go away. But if it's a relationship that you want to maintain, then forgiving actually requires a deliberate act on your end, right? It becomes a mental decision for you to actually forgive. And the same thing goes with if you're on the other end of it, if you're looking for forgiveness, right? You have to actively, be patient with the person who you've lost trust with. Okay. So let's dive in. The story, right? Okay. Let's talk about the first story, because I have two different stories that I wanted to share today. One is where I wanted to learn how to forgive. And then the second is when I was hoping I could have been forgiven. So the first story is me learning how to forgive. And this is a story about me and my partner, my boyfriend. We've been dating for 2 years. And there was a moment in our relationship earlier on where a little bit of trust was kind of lost, for lack of better terms. And there was two sides, right? There's always two sides to every story. So one, I have a lot of traumas. Surprise, surprise. Welcome to the world where everybody has trauma. And I had this feeling of some kind of jealousy thing. And I can't really say that there was a feeling of it, because now that I look back on it, I can tell it was just my trust issues kind of stemming up, right? And so what ended up happening is I looked, so ashamed. I looked through his phone. I did. I was that girl. And I normally don't do that. I was getting really serious with this guy. And, when you're getting really serious with somebody, you kind of freak out a little bit and you almost look for ways to prove your traumas right, which makes no sense, right? Because I'm like, why am I looking for trouble right now? Because I don't believe that what I have in front of me is actually good. And then that's what ended up happening. I looked through his phone and I found a message that wasn't a bad message, but it could have been misinterpreted for somebody who wasn't in on the conversation prior to. So what ended up happening in that story, I found this message that was misinterpreted on my end, but could have been received as a very flirty message. It was someone he had a past with, but was no longer connected to anymore. And I found that they, had been messaging back and forth, innocent messaging, nothing bad. But then there was this one message that I saw that he sent, and it said, "I had a dream about you." And it haunted me. And then it put this scary face emoji. And when you look on that from the outside perspective, and you're not really considering everything else that has happened, prior to, or the relationship or anything, you receive that as, okay, maybe they had a sexual dream and he's sharing that with her. And that was kind of a think that's what happened in my head, right? I'm like, oh my God, he is telling this girl about this sex dream that he had, and he wasn't going to tell me, and he's messaging her. Like, I don't care if he has sex dreams about other girls, because like what am I supposed to do? Tell him he can't dream? Like, come on, that's unrealistic. But the fact that he was like sharing it with her, that got me in a different headspace. And basically, to make the long story shorter, I confronted him, like, I kid you not, at freaking 2 a.m. Ooh, crazy. Okay, I'm not like super crazy, but I did have that trigger. And so, yeah, went in while he was asleep and was like, who's Jackie? I'm just going to call her Jackie because I don't want to add names to it. But basically, I was like, who's Jackie? I know you guys have heard the stories before of crazy girls. We're crazy because we've been traumatized, just so you know. But yeah, so we ended up having that conversation, and he ended up telling me the reasoning behind the message, right? He was in a rush. He just ended up sending this text message, didn't think of it. And the dream was actually just a scary dream of her, like actually a ghost, like what actually haunted him. It had nothing to do with any sexual dreams that I interpreted or that I assumed, right? And I mean, towards the end of that conversation, basically, I still received it as if he had cheated. And it was the act of him reaching out to her, right? And also because it was an old fling. And so that was like, that sent me to a whole other direction. And I try to pride myself on being, a little more calm and collected, even though I'm a passionate person. But when it comes to this stuff, I try to be more understanding. But with that, I was not understanding because I had just a lot of trust issues. And so, yeah, that was a hard one to forget for a while, because what I ended up doing is I ended up creating all these stories and scenarios in my head as to why it turned out this way. I considered him a liar in my head, and I fought so hard to make my belief the truth, which makes no sense, because why would I want my belief to be the truth? When I think about it, I'm like, okay, I'm calling him a liar in my head. I'm calling him all of these things. And do I actually want that to be my truth? Do I actually want what I'm saying to be true? And that was a hard thing for me, because I had to sit with that. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't want to be right. So why am I fighting so hard to be right when I could make a decision and I could choose the narrative that's going to be played out in my head? So it's either that and hold on to this grudge and allow it to fester within our relationship, or let it go. I thought that the way to learn how to forgive was by the other person proving to me that they're worthy of being forgiven. And yes, them showing up and loving support while, things are getting healed and mended within the relationship is helpful. But at the end of the day, your ability to forgive someone is going to solely rely on your love for yourself and knowing how to navigate your emotions and being really deliberate in your thoughts, right? Choosing to not see the negative side of everything, right? Choosing a different story. And I've said this several times in my podcast and everything, is you can actually choose your story. And a lot of people, when I first heard that, when someone told me that I could just choose my story, I'm like, okay, that doesn't change my past. That doesn't change, what actually happened. So I can't choose my story. But let's think of it this way, right? When we have a story, I don't know if you guys have ever watched these movies where there's like 3 different stories happening all at once, right? They're doing it within the same time frame, but they watch these people have these different portions of their lives being lived out all within the same time frame. If I really take a step back and look at my story as a whole and consider all of the different perspectives that have happened all within the same time frame, there is another story to tell. There is a happier version that you can revert to. And whether it's true or not, the past and the future don't actually exist. It only lives within your mind. The only time is really the present. And so I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but have you ever made up a story? Because if you have, then that can eventually become your truth if you continue to say that story over and over. And that's why the whole concept of, fake it till you make it is a thing too, because people will, say that they're this, and that, and they learn how to live up to it. So basically what I'm saying is you can create your story, you can create your life and choose how it wants to be lived and choose the stories that you tell yourself. And you can choose to live in those painful, moments and relive over and over, or you can choose to move forward and learn how to forgive and realize that forgiveness really it's not a prerequisite to healing, right? But it is a very important part of your healing journey. So I had a friend actually message me and said that comment, I feel like he said, I feel like forgiveness is kind of it's just thrown around loosely, and people feel like they need to have forgiveness in order to be completely healed. I don't believe that either, because there are so many times where I haven't ever heard the I'm sorry that I think I deserved. And it doesn't mean that I can't reach full fulfillment or full healing. It just means that I have to learn how to navigate that for myself. And how do I figure that out? Well, learn more about myself, right? That was a very hard one for me to learn how to overcome, because that was not just, a singular moment that defined me, right? It wasn't a singular moment that I was like, okay, my trust is all out the window. My trust has already been, a little faulty because of my own past, right? And it wasn't something that I had figured out within other relationships. So this was the relationship it was coming up in, obviously, because it was my current relationship. And so there's just a lot that goes into it. But what ended up helping me really is learning how to navigate myself and feel more confident in myself. Oftentimes I feel like we choose not to forgive for the sole fact of not wanting to get hurt again. And that makes sense. We don't want to hurt ourselves. Like, why would we willingly put our hand in the fire if we're going to get burned? We probably wouldn't, right? But I think what's really important is knowing that you are safe on the other side, even if you did get hurt again. And again, you have to kind of trust your own intuition with this. And I know people say, trust your gut, trust your intuition, but then, you counterbalance it with your mind, which is good. It's healthy, right? We have to have those two kind of working together to let us know, hey, this is not going to work out for you. This is where I'll say, maybe not religion, but your spirituality can really, really come into play. Because when you feel secured in whatever it is that you believe in, then you know that you're safe. Even if you get hurt. It doesn't mean that because I'm safe that I'm never going to get hurt. Pain will still always exist, but we can choose how long we suffer. That was my experience with it. And honestly, it took me, I think like a couple of days ago was when I finally told my boyfriend that for that situation specifically, that I really fully have forgiven him. And that was like a year ago. A year ago. I mean, I already forgave him a while ago. I just never expressed it. Yesterday, or was it like 2 days ago, was when I actually expressed it. So that was nice. It felt good. It felt good to say like, hey, by the way, I forgive you. Learning how to forgive someone is very, very, very difficult. But again, the more we learn how to understand ourselves, the more we're able to have compassion and empathy for other people and their perspectives and forgiveness. Somebody brought up to me the idea of, the ways in which they have been hurt and why where they struggle to forgive. And some of the words that came up was they find it difficult to forgive ignorance. They find it difficult to forgive when their heart is broken. They find it difficult to forgive when they've been lied to. These are they're painful, right? When we experience that, because we had trust, right? The only way you can ever be hurt really with or added having dishonesty or distrust with somebody is if you already had trust. So you trusted this person. These are painful things to experience when you trusted someone. Even like abandonment, that's a trust that can also be destroyed. When we really, really consider our own imperfections, right? Our humanity, how flawed we are, how much mistakes we actually make, even the ones that are not seen, even the ones that are not glorified. When we truly look at our history, like let's look at it. Are we ever perfect? No. We make mistakes all the freaking time. And there are so many times we act out of character because there was a painful experience that we had just lived, or, something is pulling away at us. Whatever the case is, there's usually a reason why people act dishonestly. And I won't say that everybody has a good heart or desires to be good, because that's not true, right? There has to be some bad out there for the good to actually exist, right? Otherwise, good wouldn't really be a thing. Everybody would just be neutral. But I will say, for the most part, humans we do desire to be loved and feel good and make others feel good. But when we feel bad, sometimes we want to hurt other people too, because we want people to resonate with us, which is why they say the whole idea of misery loves company. We'll actually seek other people who are miserable so that we could have congruency within our thoughts and our external world. One thing you'll notice too is we often will seek congruency within our internal worlds to match our external worlds. And what I say by that is, if you feel crappy on the inside, you're going to seek crappy situations on the outside. When you feel destructive on the inside, you're going to go and try to find ways to be destructive. When you feel love, you're going to want to seek real, true love, right? But the thing is we think that we could just lie to ourselves, thinking that we could just, overcome any issue, yada, yada, just by telling us these bullcrap affirmations. But that's not always the case, right? We have to actually feel it. We can't just put it in our head, like, I feel strong and worthy and my finances are great. And when your bank account's at zero, it's really, really hard. And you end up being angry because of the incongruency. So we will often seek to find ways to match that. So anyways, what I'm saying is, when you truly, truly understand yourself, when you start to have the thoughts about your thoughts, which is your consciousness, right? When you start to have more mindfulness of your emotions, doesn't mean you're judging your emotions. It means you're observing them, right? You're saying, okay, I think I'm hurting. Yes, I'm hurting. Not saying that that's a bad thing, not saying it's a good thing, but that's what it is. It just is. When you learn how to have compassion for yourself, you really learn how to have compassion and empathy for others. And so I wanted to explain a little bit more as well, because compassion and empathy are two different things, right? And I want to quote Brene Brown. If you guys don't know who Brene Brown is, she's freaking amazing. She talks about all sorts of things with our emotions and how we navigate life. What do we do when we're hurt? What do we do when we're feeling happy, etc.? She had a really good book, is Atlas of the Heart, if you guys ever want to read it. Her quote on compassion versus empathy. So she says, compassion is fueled by understanding and accepting that we are all made of strength and struggle. No one is immune to pain or suffering. Compassion is not a practice of better than or I can fix you. It's a practice based in the beauty and pain of shared humanity. And that's by Brene Brown. So what she's saying is when we're having compassion, we're not trying to compare our stories of pain with other people. We're not saying that, my pains are worse than yours. And we're not saying that I'm here to fix you. It's saying, I get it. You're human. You fucked up. We fucked up. Right? And that's okay. It's okay to accept people's mess ups, because that doesn't mean that they're going to be messed up for the rest of their life. I can't tell you how many times I have done something and was like, this will not define me. This will not define me. And I've changed. When people say people never change, that's not true. That is just simply not true. People don't change when they choose not to change, but people can change. It just requires action and the decision, really, at the end of the day. Like, how painful is it to you that you feel like you need to change? Sometimes we have to wait till it's really fucking painful, which is, the harder way of learning. But sometimes the only way of learning is we got to get hurt. We got to allow adversity into our lives. Going back on the topic of forgiveness, and I want to give you guys the other story that I wanted to share when I was on the other side, wishing I could have been forgiven. So I had this relationship, or my friendship, for about 5 years. We were best friends and we were inseparable. Some would say unhealthily inseparable. We were highly dependent on each other. Codependency, we were there. Yeah, we were attached to each other's hips. We lived our lives together for 5 full years. Down the line, she started going down a route that was not conducive, I guess, to my beliefs. It challenged my beliefs. She got involved in some things that I assume would affect her, right? Because if we're living our lives in certain environments, it's going to affect her. So basically, she got involved in something that I didn't necessarily approve of, nor did I want it in my life. And so that was very difficult for me, because they say, who you are spending time with, the top 5 people or something that you spend time with, are the ones who affect you the most. And I was in a space where, I was very sensitive to letting other people in, and being very selective with what I was allowing to let in, because I had been hurt. I just got through a divorce, actually, and I needed time to myself. And it was very difficult to get time for myself when, I spent so much time with my best friend. And so basically what ended up happening, fast forward 5 years, she ended up breaking up with me as a friend. Told me that I didn't know how to hold space for her, and that I was very hard on her. And mind you, there is some truth to that, right? Because before, when I was hurt and I didn't know anything about myself, my solution to when she was venting was to provide answers, right? And I was very, very masculine before. And so when she tried to speak to me and wanted me to hold space, me and my masculine energy was trying to give her advice that she didn't ask for. And so I totally understand why she thought I was not a person who held space well. But it's so interesting, because I'm not that way anymore. So that's why I'm saying people can change. So anyways, we ended up breaking up our friendship, and without much of a closure at all, right? She sent me this text, basically told me, hey, I'm hurt as your friend and I don't want to be friends anymore, to summarize it, right? And I sent her 2 really, really long emails trying to communicate best I could, and not much effort was given back. So I let that go. But I'm telling you, feeling the amount of guilt we can feel for especially not having the right type of closure can be very painful on the receiving end, right? And not that, I'm sure when you're the person who had your trust lost, when you're not on the receiving end of it, right? You probably don't want the other person to actually be happy and healed. I'm sure there's a part of you that's like, well, good, you should feel bad and shameful, which is so sad, right? Because now we're just trying to spread more hate, which makes no sense. But anyways, on my end of it, because I felt like there was some truth to what she was saying, I was very, very hard on myself. I told myself, no wonder why no one wants to be your friend. No wonder why, you struggle to connect with women. You don't hold space. You don't. And I started going down this entirely dark rabbit hole of shame and guilt because this girl, this friend of mine, I loved like a little sister, and she didn't know, but I had done a lot to learn how to detach myself from her because I took it upon myself to be her guardian for some reason, right? And I can't explain it. Some will say maybe it was a soul contract. I have no idea. But I felt very drawn to her, and I felt like I needed to protect her. And there was things that, I taught her how to drive. I helped her buy her first car. I helped her, I did a lot of things that it didn't make sense to me why she thought I was a bad friend. But then I realized it was because I didn't, know how to deal with the emotional side, which is what she wanted. But I took care of everything on the physical side. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Because I know that men, and no shame against men, but sometimes have a tendency to do this, right? I took care of her. I bought her everything. I did everything for her. And yet she still says that I was a bad boyfriend or a bad husband or whatever the case is, right? When your physical needs are taken care of and you don't have any dire pressing needs, your emotional side is also another portion of your health that needs to be taken care of. And when your physical needs are taken care of, then you have more time to think about your emotional needs. And so I, wanted her to forgive me for the areas that I fell short, or that I felt like I fell short. And a year later, we ended up meeting up, and we had, like, I kid you not, we sat together for eight hours, the whole work day, just talking. And I made a decision to not really make this about me. I made the decision that when I was going to go have a conversation with this woman, that the starlight was going to be on her. And I wanted to understand her fully, and I wanted to hear her. And so I chose not to say anything, and anything she had to say to me, I took it. I took the punches. I let her say whatever she wanted. And I did it not out of trying to be the better person, but I did it because I wanted to understand her, because I felt like there was a disconnect, right? And after we had the conversation, I came to my own realizations afterwards. It took me a couple of weeks, right? Because it takes me a while to process things, especially if I'm busy, right? I just kind of put it off to the side until I can actually attend to it. Yeah, I realized that when you're seeking to be the one forgiven, it does no justice for you and the people that you're going to be, affecting in relationships in the future. It does no justice for you to hold on to that guilt and shame. All it does is make you feel icky inside, for lack of better terms. It hurts you because you begin to shut yourself out from opportunities, things, people's relationships, all sorts of things, just because you feel like you're not worthy. And I want to say that needs to be something that you learn how to let go. Because what I ended up realizing after that conversation, that 9-hour-long conversation with my best friend at the time, is that yes, she was justified in some of the pain she felt. But a lot of it, I realized, was no matter what I did, I would have still ended up the bad guy. Because on her end, she was the victim. And she deemed me the villain. And it didn't matter what I did. right? It didn't matter if I was the most perfect friend. It didn't matter. The only way I could have been the friend that she wanted me to be was by not being flawed, by being perfect, by choosing not to express myself. And that doesn't do me any justice. So the reason I'm saying this is because even though we want to seek forgiveness from other people for whatever reason, right? To feel like we're doing better, to feel like we're good people, right? You also have to consider the other person's side of the story. Are they in a victimhood mindset? Are they blaming you for a lot of things that they didn't even ask for clarity for? Because a lot of the times, well, when you're blaming someone, they blame you for the wrong things. Like, I don't know how to explain this. Situations get misinterpreted often, right? You know what it makes me think of is, think of like an action movie, right? An action movie, there's this person who's like holding this other person captive, and they're saying, I'm going to off this person. And so the hero comes in, is like, dude, you can't do that. This is not good. Don't off that person. And why are you a bad person? Right. But little did we know, the person who is holding the other person captive is actually having his family being threatened because the real bad person is holding their kid captive. And so they have to do this bad act, right? The reason I'm sharing this story is because we don't know the full spectrum of the story ever. And I say ever because we will never know. We are limited to our perspective. That's all we can see. We can only know as much as we actually know. And so human error, we are flawed. All of us are flawed. None of us are perfect. If you find someone, please let me know. But I know they don't exist. So good luck. It's like finding a unicorn. So it's just important to also consider the other person's story. And even though you're the one seeking forgiveness, that doesn't mean you have to hold on to guilt and shame, because when you hold on to guilt and shame, you're choosing to suffer. You're actively choosing to suffer. What you can do to learn how to move past the feeling of guilt and shame when it comes to forgiveness, when you're the one who wants to be forgiven, is you learn from the lessons, you find the lessons fast, and you move on. You close that chapter. I know it sounds so much easier said than done. I'm saying it like as if you could just, wipe your hands clean and then drop the book or drop the mic and that's it. That's not the case, right? It takes a lot of work. In order for you to learn how to close that chapter, you have to understand where you went wrong so you can justify it in your head, right? And then say, okay, I made a mistake. And I think it's just learning how to have compassion for yourself, right? Because we can be very hard on ourselves, very, very hard on ourselves. I wanted to say this quote because I wrote this down this morning. I thought it was so profound. When you write something, you're like, I think this is going to be a good thing to say. Forgiveness, and we need to remember, forgiveness is not redemption for the other person. It's redemption for your reclaimed power. And the longer you hold on to resentment is the longer you decide that you're the victim in the story. And the victim never holds any power. So you got to choose, are you the victim in the story? Or is it just a story and you learned a lesson and you moved on? Then you become the hero. That's fun. Okay, so to wrap this up, basically I'm saying is forgiveness does take time. It takes time. And everybody's recipe is going to be different, right? You can't say like, oh, it takes 1 year to get over your ex. That's fucking lie. Because it took me 4 years. Surprise, surprise. I hold on to things. But, everybody's process is going to be different. But I will say, the more you seek to learn yourself and understand yourself and learn how to have compassion for yourself, seeing all the times that you've made mistakes, looking at all the times you wish you would have had forgiveness, then you can begin to understand and have compassion for human error. And we have a lot of human error. And this doesn't just apply to personal relationships. We talk about businesses too, right? There's some businesses out there who have done some messed up shit. But I mean, look who's leading it. Humans who are also full of error. We think these, we look at the other side of the screen or we read something online and we immediately think, okay, they need to be perfect because this is their job or whatever. We just make mistakes, and that's what it is. But we will not be able to forgive other people if we don't learn how to have compassion for ourselves and learn ourselves. I will say learning to forgive is not a prerequisite for healing. It's not required. You probably won't ever get that sorry you're looking for, right? Sometimes we do. And if we do, cool, lucky, good for us. But more oftentimes than not, we don't get that sorry, that apology that we feel like we deserve. And that's okay, because if you are loving yourself and you can learn how to lean into yourself and your own beliefs and know that no matter what on the other side, you're good, then you're good. That's it. Simple facts, right? We can choose to reframe our stories. And I know it sounds really, I hate it because I look at all these people who are, manifestors and blah, 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 and all this crap. And I think it's like, oh, okay, I could just choose and change my own story. I know I kind of have combated it a little bit, but it took me probably a year of looking into myself and trying to learn and understand the human mind that I realized, holy crap, I actually can reframe my story. Holy crap, I actually can change my story. And you know what's crazy? Okay, let's think of this. That I just had this thought. Say you lie to somebody and you tell them that story of you, whatever lie story you made up. That story is now a real story. It exists because now that other person believes it. So now you just created a whole another ripple effect into the vortex. I'm going down a way deep rabbit hole. Let's not. Anyways, let me reel myself back in because I can go way off topic here. But yes, we can choose to reframe our story. And past, future, they don't exist. Only the present. And what I mean by that is that the past and the future exist only within your mind. And if you learn how to control your thoughts, be more aware of them, be more mindful, then you can change it, right? And the more you continue to live in your past and relive those traumatizing stories, the stories where you want to forgive someone or want to be forgiven, you're just going to keep replaying that scenario and reliving the same story over and over and over. We can also shift from victimhood to empowerment, right? When we're on the other side of when we're the ones being hurt, we can shift ourselves from that victimhood mentality and empower ourselves. And we do that by changing the narrative. We do that by learning the lessons that that needed to be learned within that time frame. We can learn how to empower ourselves by choosing to pick out the lessons from each time there has been adversity within our lives. One last thing. I know I said I wanted to talk a little bit about when to decide to close a door. So sometimes a relationship seems redeemable, right? And you're like, okay, I'm going to keep holding on. And once you make that decision to forgive somebody, stick with it, right? Don't be that butthead who's like, well, I'm going to forgive you, but I'm about to give you 2 years of pain. Please don't be that person, because I was that person. It's not fun for anyone, by the way. But if you're trying to figure out if you should leave a relationship or situation, right? So when you're trying to figure out if you are at your limit, check in with yourself and then start asking deep questions. How are they responding to you and this mistrust that had happened? Are they truly sorry? Are they genuinely sorry? Not to say that you are going to make sure that they suffer, because that is not that is not the way to reach, reconciliation within the relationship. Because I know, and I only speak from experience again, because I've done this. I'm like, okay, you're not sorry unless you feel my pain. That's not true. They don't have to feel guilt in order to feel sorry, right? So, but are they sorry? Meaning to say, how are they handling this sensitive topic moving forward? If you get re-triggered, how are they handling you? Knowing that it was a painful moment, right? Now, if you're constantly nagging at them and saying, oh, remember that time when you did this, this, and this? Okay, that's different. But when you first start healing, you're probably going to bring it up a couple times because you're still probably hurt, right? So how are they handling you when you do that? When you're feeling triggered? Are they being patient with you? Are they communicating with you? I apologize if you're getting re-triggered from this moment. How can I help? How are they communicating with you? How are they dealing with it, right? And again, just really trusting your gut intuition, really, really leaning into what you feel is going to be good for you and not considering them at that moment, right? Like, you need to be highly considerate of what you're willing to go, what your boundary is within that relationship. If it's meant to you, and also I will say, when it comes to closing doors, when you lean into your intuition, you lean into trusting your own decision and sticking with it, just know that if it is really, really meant for you, it will find its way back to you. Whether that's to teach you another hard lesson and break your heart. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm just saying stuff now. But yes, if it is meant for you, it will come back to you. And the only way you can really embody that quote is when you yourself have confidence in your own self-worth. People say that quote all the time, but it's really hard to believe that. And it's really hard to not want to hold on to that relationship, experience, situation, whatever, if you don't have trust in yourself and your own self-worth. And if you don't have trust in the bigger picture. So this is where I say again, spirituality can be very, very important, or your religion, whatever you want to chalk it up to, but knowing or believing that there's something out there that is working for a greater purpose for you to evolve. I feel like that is mostly what I want. I skipped a bunch of crap here that I wrote on my notes, which I tend to do a lot. But what I want to say too, when it comes to forgiveness, while I wrap this up, is you learning how to forgive is going to help promote your own growth. It's going to allow you to lean in and embrace your own growth, right? Because forgiving someone is scary. It is painful. It's hard. It's hard to do. But when we learn how to forgive somebody and we can relieve that off of our shoulders, we feel like $1,000,000. Like it feels so relieving to feel like you're not just going to keep carrying this heartache forever. It's almost like a stuck energy that just stays stuck. And the more we begin to have clarity, like I said, on who we truly are and learn to love and accept our flaws in everything, the easier it can be to forgive other people as well. And then remember, no matter what, set your boundaries moving forward, right? Actually gather the lessons that you learned and apply them to the next relationship. And know, like, okay, I didn't set my boundaries before. This is why, I got hurt because I didn't express myself when I told them when I was hurting. I didn't tell them that I was in pain or anything. Communicate more and then set your boundary. Say, hey, this is where I draw the line. And setting boundaries, by the way, doesn't mean that you don't love somebody. It just means that you are choosing to love that person and yourself simultaneously. Okay, so I want to encourage you to learn how to shift forward in your own personal development, to learn how to forgive and learn how to have compassion. And we do that by learning to love ourselves and have compassion for ourselves. Know that humans are flawed. We are flawed. Every single one of us. Know that corporations are flawed because they are run by humans. Know that there is good and bad, and one can't exist without the other. but have patience with the people who do make mistakes and are making an effort to actually redeem themselves. Because I will say people can change. As much as we like to say that quote, oh, nobody ever changes. We do. We change. Sometimes we just got to get really hurt to change. Choose. Which side of the spectrum do you want to be? Do you want to relieve yourself, forgive, and move on with your life? Or do you want to keep living that same story over and over, repeating in your head, creating stress? And actual physical ailments will happen when you continue to hold on to resentment. So choose your story. I say that every time. It's like almost like a thing I live by. Choose your story, because we really do have the power within our minds to create the stories that we want to live. And that means past and future. So I love you guys. Thank you for listening. For those of you who have been hanging out, the Danna-Gift show is coming back. I went away for like 3 months because your girl was deeply depressed. Now we're not. Well, not deeply depressed. You know, I still get sad. I still cry. just for fun, just for shits and gigs. I'm kidding. But the Danna-Gift show is coming back, and my subscribers know we're about to start doing public podcasts, you guys. I'm super excited because I'm going to schedule a public podcast. And what I mean by public podcast is we're actually going to go out in the public and run a podcast and see who wants to join in. I'm going to start running those by the end of this month. So I'm excited because my subscribers, you guys, you're going to get to see it first. The Growth Club is here to stay. Thank you for listening. Toodles.